Hello and welcome to TALRadio. At TAL, we connect those who are willing to give to those who are in need. My lovely listeners and my lovely audience, you're watching and listening to a wonderful series on self-coaching. And whenever I say self-coaching, you know who's going to be the guest. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome Andrew Tallents back on TALRadio. And all those of you, you know him, it's amazing. I'm sure you know a lot about him. But if you do not know him and you've just stumbled upon our show, well, let me just introduce you to Andrew. Andrew is a self-coaching expert, and he has actually coached hundreds of CEOs and leaders across the globe. So, Andrew, welcome to Tal Radio.
Thanks, Andy. I'm looking forward to being in this spacious studio today.
Spacious studios, we're talking about space. So, we would be talking about creating space. And when I say creating space, what does it really mean?
Well, it's in short supply these days, isn't it, Sandy? So when we think about creating space, we're all very busy people. We go from meeting to meeting, we go from Zoom call to Zoom call. And so creating space really is about four things, which we'll discuss today. So the first is creating space to think, because we're always doing things. So creating space to think. And when we think, thoughts come to us, and it means we can then start wondering what we might do with those thoughts. So creating space to think is the first thing that we need to do, because if we're doing, we can't think about
Sure.
things. The second thing, which is so important, is creating space to be in relationships with people. Because again, we're so busy and we'd rather
That's
do things
complex.
than being really interesting. And we need to create the space to do that, because we need to have the door open. We need to go for walks with people. We need to have food with people, but we need to create space to do that. So how many times have we heard people having lunch at their desks because they're busy and they need to get things done, where we could have lunch with people? So second one is creating space for relationship. When we do that, we then start to work out what's important about what we do next, because we've been thinking, we've been in relationship, and therefore we need to create space to do things. But it links into what we've talked about in the past about the important things that we do. So creating space to do the important things in life and work. And then the final one, which actually is the most important one, which we've talked about a bit in the past, is creating space just to be present. Now, whether that's for people about meditation or whether it's about just walking, but it's actually stopping thinking. It's not thinking, it's just being and being present. So we then realize what's important for us. So imagine how much space and time we need to do all those four things, but we need to do them to really be effective at what we do as leaders.
And I imagine these four things, and we need to have them in our daily life if we want to inculcate them. I'm sure it's going to be a pretty difficult task, but I'm sure since you coach so many leaders across the globe, so you'll be able to navigate us through it. So, how is it possible to really create those spaces?
So we're very fortunate as leaders. We lead our own lives, we lead communities, we lead families, we lead in the workplace, that we have the ability to decide how we spend our time. So many people I work with say to me, "Oh, Andrew, I get told by my boss or these people that I have to do this and then." Well, no, we can push back and we can say, particularly when we're remote working now as well, how we manage our own time. So the best way I can describe about how we create space is to make sure we get into a habit of making sure at some time in the day that works for us, we actually have that space to do those four things. Now, they don't need to be all in one go. It could be at different times in the day, but we can decide as human beings, as leaders of our own work lives, designing our own work lives, when we spend time in these different spaces. And for those that say to me, "I can't do that, my boss won't let me," it's because we're in a place where we don't push back and hold them to account to enable us to do our best work. Because if we're just doing all the time and not creating these spaces, we're never going to be doing the best work. So we have the ability to design our lives.
And when you were just discussing about these uses of the bosses, I would say, I remember in a previous episode, we actually talked a lot about blame game.
Yeah.
As humans, we do have this habit of, putting what we cannot do, our limitations on somebody else's shoulder. All right. So moving on, I think most of the time we often feel guilty or a little uncomfortable also when we are literally not doing anything. It's like we feel as if we are wasting our time. But technically, we are in a thought process. So how do we get out of that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting feeling, which many people have. It reminds me of a story, and I'm sure if they listen to this now, they will know. They're actually a coach now, but they used to be a chief executive where I was coaching them, and I said, look, you just need to create space to be and not to do anymore. So I encouraged her to go and sit in Hyde Park in London for 2 hours. She had time in the afternoon to take off personally. And the thought of that really sent her with shivers because she couldn't sit still for 2 hours because of the way she was programmed. She had to do all the time. So it's a very normal feeling. But the best way to think about this is the analogy or the metaphor of the oxygen mask. So when we're on a plane and we're told that if the oxygen mask come down, always put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. It's the same thing in terms of why we shouldn't feel guilty for creating space for ourselves and stop doing. Because if we're just doing all the time, we will become exhausted. We won't be able to be effective because we're just tired in terms of the things we're doing. Whereas if we create the space to do one of those four things I described, we're actually starting to look after ourselves. We stop doing, we either start thinking, we're being in relationship, we actually start to actually be present, or we actually start to do the things that are important. But we do it because we're consciously doing it. So everyone feels guilty, but actually if we think we're in service of other people, and the way that we can be in service of other people is by making sure we look after ourselves and our own well-being, and that calls for stopping doing sometimes.
You said it very rightly. I mean, you're very right when you said that constantly, if we keep on just giving, we certainly will get exhausted. It's just like the phone's battery dying if you keep on using your cell phone. So, talking about that, we have, especially, with respect to self, with all due respect to self for the cellular technology, there is so much, I would say, constant stimulation in our lives as such. You certainly have the social thing, the social setup that we have, the work setup we have, meetings, notification, and all those things. Do you sometimes feel that it actually affects our ability to think deeply?
It does, because it's all, if you think about any meditation that anybody knows out there that they're doing, when we're doing meditation or we're being still or quiet in a peaceful place, we're actually really slowing down our brain waves, in terms of our brains. So we're actually slowing the activity down. We're feeling more at peace. We're feeling calm. We're feeling more spacious. If we are constantly connecting, reacting to all the noise that's around us and the stimuli, our brain activity is actually still at a high level and it's taking energy, and it means we can't really be focusing on being present. So it does. But again, we have the ability as a human being to not react to those things. It's this thing about being connected to why I'm here in this moment in terms of what I'm here to do. There are distractions around us, temptation, whether that's food, technology, endless watching of television, whatever it might be. If those things are there to help us in what we're doing, that's fine. But if they're not, and they're just distractions to take us away from the important things, they're not serving us, and we need to be disciplined. It comes back to what we talked about, I think, in a recent podcast, being accountable for our own actions, not reacting to those things around us. It's very difficult. I think young people now are having their brains wired in such a way where they can probably work with more multiple distractions, and they have ability to do that. But still, it's not the same as being quiet in brain and really being present and being in space.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's actually quite an interesting thing to talk also, because for young people, they feel if they're doing a lot of stuff at the same time, so that is what the need of the time is. But I'm not sure how amazingly they concentrate on a particular task that way and how productive they become at the end of the day.
I agree.
So
Focus is really important. I agree.
true. So when we talk about all these things, when we talk about daily lives, our professional lives, and everything, so what is the difference between being busy and being productive in terms of mental clarity?
I think the best way to describe this is some people, it goes back to your point before, really like to be busy because they feel they're adding value because of activity. And we've all been there. We all do that. So we're looking busy, we're feeling busy, but we look at the end of the day and we actually see what we've produced as a result, which is really useful or valuable. And maybe it's not so much. So when we're being productive, not only are we doing things, but we're actually doing it in a way which is efficient, which was effective because we probably planned it by thinking and being in space about how we're going to do it. But it's also doing something which is meaningful, valuable, and we get an end result or end product. and we can be measured against that personally and by somebody else because it's actually productive. So we can still do the same hours in a day, still be feeling tired at the end of the day, but one has been productive, one has just been busy. And usually it's related to purpose, mission, clarity, essentialism, having the space for planning, all of these things which tie in, and that's the difference.
When you were just, mentioning this very statement that, I'm busy and this and that, people give all kinds of excuses. I read it somewhere. Just for out of the box, it just came into my mind that, the people who really hear this term a lot are technically the salespeople because they get to hear from their clients every time, I'm busy, call me later. I'm busy, call me later. So moving
Absolutely.
on from that, so for example, there's somebody who's just listening to you right now, and they really want to start building up this habit of creating space for everything, especially all those four things that you just spoke about some time back. So what is process? What is the way to initiate that process?
So the first thing that we can do, which is easy for everyone to do. So if people listening to this work away from their home, then what they can do is in that period between work, home and work, is to have some time just to have some space. So, for example, if people go on public transport to work or if they travel in a car, then to have the extra 5-10 minutes at the end for walking. So it might be getting off a stop earlier. It might be parking the car somewhere different, just to make sure you have 5 or 10 minutes where you can breathe and walk and have space just to think rather than just be doing. So that's the first thing. If people are out there and work from home, which a lot of people do now, it's actually changing your environment when you get up in the morning before you go into work. So let's say you've got an area that you work in your house, is to actually maybe go outside into the garden or a different room in the house just to have a different space and maybe sit in a different chair and just be in that space. That might be for thinking, it might be for planning, it might just be meditation, but just doing something different to build up a habit every day. So for me, at 6:30 every morning, I go into a different room in the house just to be in space where I know I'm not going to be interrupted, just to be and be in space for 20 minutes. That's all I do at the start of every single day. So I think that's the first thing that people can do that can build in. Then in the daytime, when they're in work, it's all very difficult because we've got schedules to be in. Get some help from a colleague, a peer. You can have a buddy doing this, where you're going to agree that just for 10 minutes, you're going to be in relationship in the day, just to talk and think about the things that we're doing, but being in relationship. And if you can both do that, you can actually hold each other to account to create space in the day to do that, as opposed to just going to get my lunch on my own, come back to the desk again and start working. So they're the two ways that maybe somebody out there listening to can just start to change, but it's really hard. We need support around us to change our habits and behaviors to be in more space in the day.
So talking about physical environment, because you just mentioned that you also probably just change your room at least for 20 minutes, but you do that every as a ritual, a morning ritual. How does physical environment, change in physical environment, how does it stimulate our reflection or our thought process? Like, how does it changes it?
It's a really, really interesting thing to think about this. And we can think about it now. So everyone that's listening to this, they're probably either sitting or they're walking or they're standing. And just by changing your physical posture actually can change the energy. So it's just changing the environment around you by moving position or moving into a different part of the room, changes your environment, which means you're then becoming conscious that you're changing that as opposed to just being in the same place for 20, 30 minutes doing whatever you're doing. So it can be as slight as that. If that's in an internal environment, it's more around the environment around you. External environments, I do a lot of external walking coaching, and it's amazing how people think differently by being in a very spacious environment. Because when we think about it, when we're walking outside, whether it's in a forest or an open space, we sometimes recognize how insignificant we really are in terms of the planet and the universe. And therefore, our problems become a lot smaller. And we actually become more clear about what options and opportunities are open to us. So we just have more things that come into our sphere of recognition, trees, the sky, birds, whatever it is, that means that we can just think more spaciously than being in our work environment. So the environment does dictate. And I've got a lot of people that actually just get up and walk for 15 minutes to change environment and suddenly they feel as though they've got space.
It's very, very true, actually. Whenever you are there in the nature, you really feel that whatever is around you, especially the what the beauty of the earth or the things that are going, around you, you really feel how little you are.
Absolutely.
And very beautifully you created that statement. So moving on, but not that everybody loves, because humans are social animals and we love people around us. So people do fear loneliness or solitude. So what would you just advise to them?
This is a really important point. There are many people that be listening to this that would have felt this, and I think there is a distinction here. I think there's feeling lonely and feeling alone. And feeling alone is much more of a self accountability type feeling where I'm choosing to be alone on my own at this moment because I need space to be. So that's a much more assertive, positive way of being. Whereas feeling lonely is much more of a negative, reactive statement, where it's more about how I feel about my relationships. So when I'm feeling lonely, it's almost a voice around, I'm not choosing to be like this. The people around me don't want to be around me, and I don't feel I've got support and love and friendships around me. It's a mindset. One I'm choosing, one is happening to me. So the way that one can move out of loneliness into feeling alone in a positive way is connecting to what we talked about before, about having a sense of purpose, about why I'm doing what I'm doing, recognizing I need to have space to be effective, and move from that negative to positive mindset. Being alone for many people is a very positive experience because it allows them just to be with their own thoughts and recognize what they need to do next. But I also recognize that being lonely or feeling lonely is not a good place for many people. So I would seek support around that, seek help, go and see friends so that they can teach you maybe how they can be with their thoughts alone, and it's okay for you too.
Lovely. So moving on, when it comes to your especially work life, so at a workplace, how do you feel that leaders and your bosses, basically, or your seniors or colleagues, can really create a space for reflection?
Great. It's a really interesting point. Leaders who are really good at this do the first thing, which is they don't appear busy to the whole organization. So, for example, you go to their office, they say, come in, take a seat. Or if you catch them in the corridor, at the water cooler, and you start chatting to them, they've got lots of time for you. So they're already demonstrating they have space in their day for those kinds of conversations. They factored it in, it's all designed into the day, and they concentrate on the important things. So that's the first thing, is how they appear to people. The second thing is that when they're in senior leadership team meetings, they're very spacious again, and they focus very much on the present and the future. They don't necessarily focus a lot on the past. So it's how the meeting feels. People don't interrupt each other. There's space for everyone to speak. People listen actively. That's all been created by the leader. And then the final thing is the way in which the whole organization communicates. And you may have heard, and your audience may have heard, lots of leaders create things called town halls, where basically they get maybe 100 people in a room and they actually create a space for them to be asked questions. And they have space to not only be asked those questions, but they also answer them fully. They don't refuse to answer them. They are coherent, and it feels as though it's an environment where there's a lot of honesty and authenticity. We cannot do any of those things if the leader is not living a life where they've got space in their diary, and they use their PA support a lot of the time to protect that in terms of making sure that things don't go in where their space can be infiltrated by other people. So they're probably the ways that leaders can do that.
Lovely. That was a beautiful demonstration. And moving ahead, I would really like to know if, people who are listening to us at the moment, if there is one tip that they could really take away from this particular episode and try to create space, what would that be?
It's simple but really hard. So what I would say, if you're listening to this now or you're watching this and you're thinking about the next half hour and what is you going to do, just stop. Stop for a moment. And in terms of one of those four spaces I talked about, just think, which one could I move into now that would help me in this moment, and trust it and just try it. But we need to stop. Just stop what you're doing right now.
Lovely. But I think before I let you go, I need to ask you another question
Sure.
that's sticking to my mind actually. That, how can we as a society, we can normalize thinking time? I mean, it's okay to take your me time, settle down, think about it, and not having others worried for us, like, oh, is something wrong with you or what? That you need me.
Yeah. We need to ask for permission. So again, we have responsibility as individuals. We recognize if we practice this, that actually having space and creating space is important to our well-being and the way we perform in the workplace. So it's explaining that to our peers, our key relationship stakeholders, our bosses, that actually if you want to get the best out of me, this is how I need to be, and I need your permission to create the space. So can we work in this way? And it's only by doing that, we can create the space. And we obviously need leaders that are accommodating of that as well. But if we don't make the first move, it's never going to happen. So we've got to be assertive. We've got to demand the space, and we all deserve it.
Lovely. So on that wonderful note, I think I have to let you go as of now because I can see you technically looking at the clock. So thanks to you. Sai, thanks a lot, Andrew, for joining us and sharing so much light on creating space. And I'm sure all my dear listeners and my lovely audience who's watching or listening to us at the moment will really think about it and ponder like how much time do they really give to themselves. So thank you so much, and people listening to Tal Radio, have a great day ahead.